Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a special partnership we share with Alaska Public Media. It is Saturday, April 23rd, 2022. And if you'd like additional weather information, you can go online to weather.gov. It's the National Weather Service site by which you can get forecast, watch, warning, advisory information for anywhere in the country. Hawaii and Alaska are located there to the lower left, and you just click on the map. It's an interactive point and click map, and we have a lot going on in the nation's midsection today. Strong low pressure frontal system is producing blizzard conditions across the western Dakotas, eastern Montana, northeast Wyoming. We have tornado watches. One of them as far north as southeast North Dakota and northwest Minnesota. Another one down across Oklahoma with a couple of severe thunderstorm watches in between. In addition, we have also some flash flood watches and high wind warnings and advisories, as well as red flag warnings for windy and dry conditions causing extreme fire danger from areas of central Nebraska into Kansas and the Texas Oklahoma panhandle. So a lot going on there. As far as we're concerned, we are starting to see significant snow melt across the interior, and we expect that now at this time of year with the growing sun angle. Temperatures have been getting up into the 40s and 50s during the daytime, especially north of the Alaska Range down through the Yukon River Valley. So that will facilitate more significant snow melt now as we go through the rest of this month into early May. On top of that, we are going to likely see temperatures averaging above to much above normal across the state as we close out the month and start May, especially through the southwest and west side of the state. In the meantime, though, low pressure and a frontal system has brought some rain showers to the panhandle today. Those will linger across the panhandle into the day on Sunday. And I've been talking about an active sunspot group that a week ago was just on the northeast limb of the sun, has now rotated into view and is directly pointed at Earth. But so far, there have been no significant coronal mass ejections, so we're not anticipating any major, geomagnetic storms or enhanced auroras as a result. It's been rather quiet the past couple of days. And then there are 4 planets visible in the early morning sky, and I'll tell you which ones and what you might be able to see here if skies are clear at your location. Well, taking a look at a couple of FAA webcams, Galena has had mostly sunny skies, facilitating that snow melt. Temperatures have been up into the mid-40s so far this early afternoon. Ketchikan is under the clouds, lower cloud cover, some fog, occasional rain showers, and 45 degrees. And there across the panhandle, we do expect the rain showers to linger throughout the day on Sunday. Looking at the solar disk for today, you see there are 2 active sunspot groups, 2993 and 2994, pointed directly at Earth, but so far they have failed to pop off any significant M or X class flares when they're directly pointing at us. So that would be favorable for really bringing on maybe a late season auroral display, because our auroral viewing season is drawing toward a close. We got a little more time left, but not much once we get into early May. Simply too much daylight. And speak of growing daylight, if you're up early, 5:45 in the morning, you may be able to see 4 planets along the east-southeast horizon: Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Saturn. Mars and Saturn, though, will be very difficult to see simply because they're not as bright, and with the growing twilight at this time of year, they get washed out. So you might have a shot at seeing Jupiter and Venus if you got a good view of the lower eastern, southeastern horizon in the week ahead, and providing skies are clear. Satellite imagery shows low pressure south, well south of Kodiak Island down there in the North Pacific. It's going to ride just south of the Gulf North Pacific interface. The main low is way back out west there of Shimia and the western Aleutians. That low will stay off the Kamchatka coast, but force an occluded front across the central Aleutians as we go through Sunday and into Monday. There is that area of low pressure this afternoon south of the Gulf. It has allowed moisture to work its way along the panhandle all the way back toward over the Kenai Peninsula, even Kodiak Island getting showers there along the coast. Some snow showers in the coastal mountains and the higher elevations, and we also have a weak low there around the lower Yukon Delta that'll kind of wobble on up across Norton Sound to near Nome overnight and early on Sunday morning. Otherwise, weak high pressure extends from the eastern Russia across the Arctic coast to northwest Canada, and that'll keep a little quieter conditions there, though there could be some areas of haze and a little fog there along the Arctic northern coast as we go through tonight, early Sunday. There's the low, far western Aleutians, and it will continue to push that occluded front into the central Aleutians on Sunday with wind and rain. Meanwhile, a few very light rain or snow showers, or more like sprinkles or flurries, could occur from areas of the Seward Peninsula down through the western half of the Alaska Range, with rain showers beginning to break up, and they'll become less numerous by the time we get into Sunday across, I should say Monday, by the time we get across the Panhandle. Can't rule out a few flurries still lingering there in the higher elevations of the Alaska Range, a light snow shower flurry, and a sprinkle or two there in some of the lower elevations. Temperatures will generally stay just above freezing across the Gulf Coast area, but back up 40s and even some lower mid-50s, 55 there at Fairbanks on Sunday afternoon. Generally 40s to near 50 in the Panhandle. Monday morning lows below freezing across much of the mainland, but holding up near or above freezing there in the Panhandle, Gulf Coast back through the Aleutians. And then temperatures Monday afternoon will be in the 40s and 50s there up through the Yukon Valley, especially north of the Alaska Range. 6 to 10 day temperatures April 29th through May 3rd will average above to much above normal over the western side of the mainland, especially centered on the southern part of the Seward Peninsula down through the southwest, centered on Bethel. And precipitation may average a bit above normal, especially across the southwest and the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Here's your aviation weather. If you are planning a flight Sunday into Monday, we'll have an area of low pressure weakening along the Gulf and North Pacific interface, and then a stronger low out way in the western Aleutians up against near the Kamchatka coast. That'll force an occluded front through the central and eastern Aleutians later Sunday and into Monday. Otherwise, rather some widespread IFR conditions along the Arctic and west coast of the mainland, as well as areas of IFR up and along the Yukon River Valley, south side of the Brooks Range, including the Yukon Flats, and a broad area of IFR conditions, again, central and western Aleutians. Sunday afternoon, we should see some improvement in the mainland, at least IFR becoming MVFR. Still, though, IFR conditions from Norton Sound along the lower Yukon Delta, and then extending out through the Bering and through especially the central western Aleutians. And Sunday night and early Monday morning, we look for widespread IFR conditions to redevelop across much of the mainland along and north of the Alaska Range, all the way along the Arctic coast, west coast, southwest coast, down into the eastern Aleutians and tip of the Alaska Peninsula. And then Monday afternoon, we expect those lower ceilings to lift again and improve in the mainland to at least MVFR for the afternoon hours on Monday, with IFR conditions continuing north slope along the Arctic coast, as well as just off of the southwest coast in through the eastern Bering and down along the tip of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Well, pass conditions on Sunday. Anaktuvuk Pass will start out IFR in the morning, giving way to VFR conditions, as will Adigan Pass. Further south and west along the west arm of the Alaska Range, generally MVFR conditions will hold at Lake Clark and Merrill throughout the day, though we can see a pocket of stubborn IFR conditions along the west entrance there of Merrill Pass. Going up to Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions. Windy Pass should see VFR conditions become MVFR on Sunday. Same thing as we work our way east. Isabel Pass, VFR conditions becoming MVFR. And then further east, Mentasta Pass should generally be MVFR throughout the day, with IFR conditions a little further east along the Alcan border. And then westward, Tanita Pass will see MVFR conditions become VFR. And Portage Pass will be MVFR becoming VFR. And then in the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will start Sunday morning IFR, giving way to MVFR conditions, as there is some improvement there in the ceiling heights. And then looking at freezing levels, the surface freezing line Sunday morning runs through the inner channels of the Panhandle, northern Gulf Coast, across the Kenai, on up into the southwest interior, running up to about the central Yukon Valley, then swinging back down across the southeast and into the central Bering Sea. We have areas of the interior to locally as high as 4,000 feet. Especially as we go up into the Yukon Territory, and then also a bump in the aloft freezing levels 2, 4, and 6,000 feet in the western Aleutians associated with that stronger low and occluded front. So this will translate to potential for some icing between 5 and 12,000 feet, rather isolated there in through the Gulf area, perhaps in the Panhandle, and then a broader area through the central and lower Bering Sea between 4 and 14,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds are strongest from the northwest, eastern Russia into the southwest coast, 80 to 95 knot wind max there. Otherwise, low pressure circulation along the lower Gulf, North Pacific interface, and then way back out far western Bering, just off the Kamchatka coast. 9,000 foot, we see a few low pressure circulations. Again, the lower Gulf, North Pacific interface, weak low circulation, lower Yukon Delta, and then that stronger low back out across the far western Bering, and again bringing some stronger southwesterly winds into the central Aleutians on the order of 45 to 55 knots. And then finally bringing things down to 3,000 feet, we still see that low circulation along the lower Gulf North Pacific interface, with the strongest low out there in the far west, with winds upwards of 75 knots from the east-northeast there along the Kamchatka coast, but a broad area of 40 to 50 knot winds at 3,000 feet across the western and central Aleutians. And that will translate to the potential for considerable moderate turbulence through the western and central Aleutians, surface to 4,000 feet aloft. And then a pocket of some turbulence possible, the southern third of the Panhandle between the surface and 6,000 feet. So that wraps up your flight weather. If you do have a flight plan, check the latest conditions and forecast. And if you are able to get out, have a safe one.
You guys got everything tied down back there?
Yeah.
Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above, and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. But they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires.
And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Wow, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where you want?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
There's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan in the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
this was
look
deep.
at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska, but that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly my son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, ICESat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the ICESat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, to close out our show, we'll start with the marine weather segment and look at the sea ice edge. The ice continues to retreat rather rapidly. We are at that point of the year where high sun angle, the melting that is occurring now along the ice edge, makes for very unstable conditions. Be especially cautious. The shore line ice there that breaks up and continues to shift around, and we have a lot of areas beginning to open up there now across the northern Bering, and we expect the retreat to continue here as we close out the month and see increasingly warmer temperatures across the west side of the state. Across the Arctic regions, generally the ice still holding across the Arctic and northwest Arctic coast. We do see a few larger plinias that have opened up near Cape Lisburne and also down there south of Kivalina, and then in and around especially Norton Sound and around St. Lawrence Island. As far as marine weather forecast, though, for the Panhandle on Sunday, we'll see occasional light rain showers. Winds will be a bit of a mixed bag there through the inner channels, variable around 10 knots. Could be southeasterly there, Dixon Entrance, as high as 20 knots and 8-foot waves near Metlakatla. Otherwise, the outer coast, strongest winds Sitka on up to just south of Yakutat, easterly winds to 30 knots. Lighter either side of that, waves generally 9 or 10 feet. Monday, winds across the inner channels will be a bit more variable. Northerly Lynn Canal 10 knots, variable around Petersburg. Southerly 10 knots there, Ketchikan, Metlakatla, waves generally just a foot or two across the inner channels. Dixon Entrance maybe 5 to 7 feet. Variable winds, generally a mixed bag of 10 to 15 knots along the outer coast, waves 6 to 8 feet. Across the northwest Gulf Coast, look for variable winds mid and upper Cook Inlet as well as Prince William Sound around 10 knots, waves only a foot or two. Winds will be more westerly at the entrance of Cook Inlet at 20 knots and waves maybe 4 to 5 feet, and then more northerly winds out there across the northwestern Gulf south of Cordova and Seward at 15 knots. And then Monday, further lighter winds variable around 10 knots in many areas, with the exception of westerly at 15 knots at the entrance of Cook Inlet and just northeast there of Kodiak. Waves generally 4 to 5 feet at the mouth of Cook Inlet and a foot or two there as we go through mid and upper Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound. On Sunday, Kodiak Island on through the Alaska Peninsula, we'll see generally westerly winds from Kodiak Island to the Bering side at 15 to 20 knots, northwesterly winds to 20 knots on the North Pacific side with waves of only 6-7 feet. And then on Monday, generally west to southwest winds at 15 to 20 knots across much of the region. Waves 5 to 6 feet on the North Pacific and Western Gulf side, and 3 to 4 feet Bristol Bay down to north of Cold Bay. On Sunday, the eastern Aleutians will see southerly winds around 20-25 knots. A little stronger, 35 to 40 knot gales once you get from around Atka westward through Adak and Kiska. Waves building westward there 10 to as high as 14 feet. Wednesday, as the occluded front passes through, Monday, as the occluded front passes through, winds will become more southwesterly across the eastern and central Aleutians at 20 to 25 knots. Waves 5 to 7 feet on the Bering side and 7 to maybe 10 feet on the North Pacific side. And winds will turn a little more southeast to southerly to 30 knots there west of Adak with waves of 12 to 15 feet. A mixed bag of winds across the southeastern Bering in the vicinity of St. Paul, St. George, southeast to south winds 15 to 20 knots, but look for westerly winds coming into the southwest coast north of Nunavik Island, Hooper Bay, 15 to 20 knots, and westerly winds 15 knots into Norton Sound. On Monday, winds will have more of an east-southeasterly component. Imanak down through Nunavik Island at around 20 to 25 knots. Southwesterly low, 25 knots in the vicinity of St. Paul and St. George. And then finally along the Arctic coast, ice remaining largely in place, 15-knot easterly winds, Kaktovik through Utqiagvik, turning northeast to northerly through the lower Chukchi Sea and picking up to 20 knots through the Bering Strait. And on Monday, winds will be out of the east, northeast along the Arctic and northwest coast there, 10 to maybe 15 knots. Picking up easterly winds offshore there from the western Seward Peninsula to 25 knots there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And again, the main weather feature will be that low way out there in the western Aleutians. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.